Hello and welcome back to PA Chalk Up. I'm your host Manny, and today we have Michael. Hey, how we doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. We pretty much just filmed an episode of in the lobby, so we thought we'd press record. Again, I always say this, and people might think I'm lying, but like we do genuinely almost always film an episode before we start. Um, how are you today?
I'm splendid today. Um, for me, it's the first week. I coach in a high school. It's a K through 12 public school that's overseen by Florida State University. So it's relatively small, but I'm down in Tallahassee, Florida. This week is the first week that the kids are back. I have a big group that trains through the summer, but it's the first week where like everyone's back. Um, so I got like 9 different teams that I coach, and yeah, like 200 and 220-ish kids. So this week is a return to the chaos and kind of seeing where everything's at and what kind of like new rules and it'd be like all the new wrinkles that the school throws at you. And then I'm just talking to people about OVR and stuff. So today's a high energy week for me.
Today's a high energy week.
Yeah. Most of my days feel like weeks. So it's more
It's a great
appropriate than a
analogy.
slip up. Yeah.
Um, Before we get going with the podcast, if you give people a little background into how you sort of got involved with this industry, obviously you were a director before, you filmed one of the best documentaries. I stupidly forgot that it was you, but we ironed this out. I like to be
Most
honest.
people do.
I
Most
like to be honest.
people, uh, most of the podcasts and things that I'm on now, people have seen Westside versus the World, and it is not like a natural assumption. Even if you know that, like, oh, the director of Westside versus the World is Michael Fahey. Oh, this is the guy who does OVR over here. His name is Michael Fahey. It's not a natural assumption that that is not a coincidence. So
Mm,
it's quite common. But uh, but yeah. So my background, I grew up playing a lot of sports. I grew up in the shadow of Florida State University. So football, track. I played every sport there was when I was young. My dad was a maniac about training, and he really started my the sort of like genesis of my passion for training. It all came from him. I didn't like realize it as it was happening. This great like thing that he imparted on me. But I thought like if you found 18-year-old me, I thought I was going to go play college football at a big university. And somewhere in the middle of my senior year, my recruitment hadn't gone quite how I wanted. Some schools that I wanted to go to wanted me to take like a prep year and reclassify. Um, and that really bummed me out because I had like good grades and stuff. So I was like, I don't academically need this. But if I want to go to the schools that I want to go to, that's what I got to do. Um, and simultaneously, I was always really into the arts. So I decided sort of at the last minute, I'm going to go to film school. And then there were budget cutbacks, and I got kicked out of film school at the end of my first year. Had to find a new major, ended up in just the School of Communications, doing essentially the same thing, but in a way that didn't sound cool at parties. To say like, oh, I'm a media production through the School of Communications, and saying like I'm in the film school just felt much more interesting. Um, then in 2009, I graduate and I move out to LA immediately. I start work where I can get it.
This is a quick shout out to our main sponsor on this channel, TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr is an all-in-one platform that hosts programs, questionnaires, testing, anything that you may need for your athlete's performance, you can host it in TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr also now has 2 different sides, which is OS and Practice. For more information on TeamBuildr, check out the link in the description. And if you use code PAChalkup all together, you will get a 30-day free trial.
On on this little documentary called Forks Over Knives, which ended up being one of the most watched documentaries of all time. I think it is still the most watched documentary in Netflix history. And I ascended from intern all the way up to lead editor on that.
Nice.
So I get a ton of spam calls, so occasionally one might come in and
That's
interrupt
all
the
good.
signal. But yeah, so I moved out to Los Angeles and thought like, all right, I'm going to start my, life and career as this filmmaker and sort of like artist. But my adolescence and childhood and all of my development, this other thing that I was probably much more well known for was, that I was essentially a jock and played a lot of sports. And I'm 6'3" and 250, 245, 250 pounds now. That's basically the size that I was when I entered
Mm.
college and exited high school. So like I was a I was a big like defensive lineman walking the halls and in high school and when I was young. And I had already been to Westside Barbell when I was 12. I knew Dave Tate. Elite FTS had done seminars in my dad's garage down in Florida. And at the time, like Elite FTS was by the mid
Yeah, really good.
2000s, they were starting to become something. But like when I kind of came across Louie and Dave and everything and was literally introduced to them like in person, it was the 90s. So they weren't uh, they weren't like well known or famous or it was still just that little blacked out window strip mall gym in Columbus that like only those really in the know went to. And of course, I was a kid, so it wasn't like I was really in the know. My dad had just sort of drugged me along there. And so I get older, and 10, 15 years later, I'm out in LA. And now, because of the advent of social media in the early like 2010s, you know, Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, all these things are blowing up, and training content is blowing up. And I already, like I grew up doing a Westside Barbell template and doing conjugate and box squatting and, squatting in a monolift and wearing groove briefs and a champion suit and, you know, um, doing board presses and chains and bands. And the only way I knew how to look at training was through that like relatively advanced like conjugate lens, just because that's what I had, how my dad had trained me. Luckily, my dad was just a very good trainer and he consulted with Louie and Dave and, went straight to the primary sources. Again, we had gone to Westside, so I had this phenomenal like education through my dad that was just like natively sort of pressed into me. Then I'm out in Hollywood. I'm working on various projects and reality TV and worked for the NFL network for a few years and did a lot of like more sort of scouting based stuff and combine based stuff for them. So my like sports background, whether it was training or football, was always something that I leaned on for networking and sort of like job placement purposes as I got out into entertainment. And, so I just always had this artistic side and this athletic side. And I carried both of them with me forward. And it positioned me in like a very unique space. So I just kept getting work on sports related stuff, training related stuff. And eventually that led to floating the idea basically of what would become Westside versus the World. And my dad reached out to Louie and said, my son's going to make a movie about you. And Louie laughed and said he'd like to talk to me. And then he told me no. And, but he asked me to keep calling him. So we kept talking for months on end. And eventually that became, Westside versus the World. And while I was shooting Westside versus the World, there's the powerlifting, the two powerlifting groups, the morning crew and the night crew. Morning crew in the early morning, Bob Evans before that, or TJ's before that, the places where Louie liked to get breakfast at like 5 a.m. at the time. And by 9, the morning crew was done. And then right at 9, like all these coaches would be showing up, everyone taking sort of their pilgrimage to Westside, and Louie would entertain them for a few hours and maybe go get lunch or something. But every day you would see Louie having different versions of essentially the same conversations with new coaches who were coming in and asking essentially the same questions, but from just different vantage points. And it was all stuff that like didn't really fit within the movie for the most part. But it was stuff that I was so fascinated by because I still had all this training knowledge and I still had this like identity as, you know, an athlete or a former athlete at this point. But like it was still a realm that I was so interested in. And as you know, and then what started to happen was I started talking to a lot of the coaches during the day, and some of the coaches would keep up with me. When the movie finally does come out, I did a road show of it, and we went from gym to gym to gym to gym, all across the U.S., Canada, and Australia. And I ended up doing, you know, we would do a screening, and then I would do like a Q&A session for a few hours afterwards. And the short of it is, within about 10 minutes, the questions about the movie are done. And then it's, you know, it might be 3 more hours that I'm hanging out there, and my wife, you know, takes the keys and goes back to the hotel. And I'm, you know, out in the parking lot at 3 a.m. talking about, you know, different ways to run, like to run your dynamic effort waves, or think about, you know, like, do you box squat like your competition squat, or do you purposefully, you know, is your box squat purposefully different than your competition squat for, you know, what, like, or, you know,
There's
how do you,
nuances onto,
huh?
like just nuances on how to adapt
Yeah,
the training to fit more styles.
Our next sponsor is Apex Cool Labs. Apex Cool Labs is a pump cooling device that helps you gain further performance by cooling and aids the recovery so you can perform more for longer. To check out what Apex Cool Labs have, there's a link in the description.
Yeah, the actual conversations around the training, like, and around the I was just genuinely so interested in the content beyond the story. Now I'm very interested in all times, interested in story, and sort of how you sequence information and the arc and evolution of things. But I had gotten this. I added it up once, and, you know, you think about like when you're in college. I graduated top of my class in one of the most competitive majors that my university offered, and one of their highest rated majors. So I graduated top of my class. I didn't take notes. I didn't like go back and study, you know, like I had, you know, I was enthralled by the
process.
Well, I was genuinely very interested in the content of the classes, and I would spend all of my waking hours, you know, like trying to learn more, but I didn't like go back and slave away over notes. And I didn't really bust my ass or anything, you know, like the whole sort of point was I had, you know, a near 4.0, like within my major. I should have had a perfect 4.0. My only non, you know, A plus was, I still to this day, it's just, it was an error. It was unjust.
I went through the exact same thing.
Yeah.
My GPA is 3.95 because one lecturer decided to mark me down for something that he told me to do.
Yeah. I literally was like, okay, pull my grades with like, let me see. I was like, I went through assignment by assignment. It was like, you confirm that this is here. Back in my day, we had physical assignments. So it's, you know, pretty easy. So I was like, okay, so you confirm this is the grade that you gave me. All right. It says 97. Okay. And you have let's check your grade book. It says a 97 there. Okay. So here's where things are going wrong. I'm looking online at my grades for the individual assignments, and I'm looking at the rubric, and it says that I should have a 95A, and somehow you've given me a B. So I want to know how is there a 6-point error? And it never got changed, but it doesn't matter, especially in that field. No one even asks if you went to college. It's a very meritocracy based thing, where it's simply like, can you edit? Can you shoot? Can you write? if you can do those things, great. If you can't, then it doesn't matter how many, it doesn't matter how many letters behind your name. It doesn't matter what certifications. Nothing matters if you can't do the thing, which is a great lesson for every industry. But all of this is to say, I had been a successful student without being studious. And in a highly competitive major where we were literally like, they would record, rank, and publish us. So there was a wall that had your grades for everyone to view, and they ranked you. So you would go watch as your name went up or down. And like former athlete that I was like, oh, I love this. But to the other students, it was like very stressful. But like to me, again, it was like, this is like football practice. Like, if someone's, give me a coach who's yelling at me. Like, but all that is to say that like most people, when they're, young and they're in college, they are not 100% locked into what it is that they're studying, right? Like they kind of treat school as like a part-time job at McDonald's. Like it's something to get through so that they can go socialize or party afterwards, especially in the US. I know in other places it's a little bit different.
I'm in Scotland. It was the same.
But it's, like, so you go like, okay, as young people, when you haven't been challenged by the real world, your biggest stress is like school. And school, as it turns out, not really that stressful, not really that, it doesn't really dominate your time in the way that you think it does when you're going through it. And so then I came out and I'm, doing a self-financed, like independent documentary where, like I'm going to be broke forever if this thing fails. Like I'm risking my financial future on it, and I'm passionate about it. And I'm not reading a textbook about what Louis Simmons said. I'm sitting next to Louis with a camera running and a recording device, and we're having a conversation about it. And then afterwards, I'm editing through it, and I've got hundreds of hours, and I'm going back and forth through for thousands of hours for years. And I added it up, and I was like, if you took, the 15 hours a week that you're in class studying secondary sources, right? Like getting secondhand information sort of passively passed down to you versus this heavy experienced-based thing where I was there from 5 a.m., which meant that I had to be up at 3 to prep camera equipment and get over to the gym and drop my equipment off at the gym so that I could go meet them at the restaurant. And then, and it's like, when did I get home? Probably like 10 or 11. And, and even when I was done shooting, then I was editing full time. I'm for years on end consumed basically from like July 3rd, 2014. I can tell you the day, July 3rd, 2014 until now, days where I did not talk to or interact with a primary source in terms of training. It's been over 11 years now. I didn't even take off my full wedding day because somebody called me. Yeah, somebody called me while like it was just me alone, and I'm like waiting for my wife to get dressed and to go like meet up with the rest of the wedding party. We had a very small like COVID wedding. But so even then, like a coach called me, and so I was like, well, hey man, I've got like an hour and a half here where it's just me alone in a terrible little like Airbnb with not even a TV, like let's have a conversation to sort of distract me from the anxiety of dealing with, the pomp and circumstance of a wedding. But it's, and I was able to leverage that position to, be able to talk to anyone the same way, like you doing a podcast, like you get to like through the flattery of cameras and a platform and a microphone and stuff, like it gives you access and a reason to have a conversation with anybody, and a very high likelihood that they'll come talk to you.
Yeah. Onto that point, Thomas Newman, who's also a great guy and mentor of mine. Um, Something to what you've said is that first-hand experience, first-hand knowledge from the coach that's sort of implementing it and ironing out all the wrinkles. It's
Hmm.
I've this episode will be 102 like coach episodes. Then there's like different conferences I've done. I've done some solo. So like it's been over 100 episodes. But if we think about the hours, each are about an hour and some long.
Hmm.
Like if we were to account all that time, that is more than a PhD.
Right.
So like
That's what I'm getting
when
at.
you yeah, when you're sitting next to Louis for hours on end, and then you're speaking to individual guys hours on end, like not only are you being immersed in the West Side culture, but like you're getting a PhD firsthand on how to implement and program everything the way that they do it.
Hmm. Yeah, and so that was it. Like adding up the style of documentary that I do, it's the equivalent of getting multiple PhDs. Like, and you're doing it all. It's just like within training to tie into OVR. You know, like if I said go, go do. I'll often prescribe like 8 jumps within a workout. You know, like if I said go jump as high as you can 8 times, that's even though it's intensive because you're trying to jump as high as you can, effectively it's extensive, right?
Mm.
Like because it's so brief and it's so hard to quantify that you're not going to learn much of anything. Your your relative exposure uh, compared to the intensity is high, but the
Mm-hmm.
the effect of it is so low because we're bound by these constraints of time. So your actual time to interact with those efforts is so short that it's an intensive output in terms of like sort of the damage and fatigue that it causes, but it's extensive in terms of your rate of adaptation, primarily because you can't learn from it. But
Mm-hmm.
suddenly, if you put an OVR jump down and you're recording the jump height and you're simply looking at your jump height at the conclusion of each rep, now the same exact activity now flips from being intensive on one hand and extensive on the other to intensive on both hands, where now your like conscious awareness of it can be leveraged into it. Um, and so that's in looking at, like going to school. So much of school is, again, I went through it, like so much of school is relatively passive. You are allowed to be passive. You don't have to engage. And now with like AI and stuff, it's so much worse. It's very hard to get a good education,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the education environments as they currently exist. You're sort of set up to long to distract yourself from the education that's trying to happen in front of you. Versus if you're thrown into the gym with Louis, it's immersive, it's intensive,
Mm-hmm.
like on all, it's in your face. Just in addition, you're seeing, it's like throwing VBT on a bar where all of a sudden you're seeing more than just the sets and reps. You're seeing all of these other details. You're
Yeah.
seeing all the things that he didn't write, all the things that
Mm.
were given. Like that's the real key to understanding anything is figuring out what did the author, that first person, what did they assume was given, right? Like what are they not telling you about what are they not telling you about what they did before? What are they not telling
Mhm.
you about how their room is set up?
Yeah. So I saw a video recently where it to that point it's kind of um, sad to hear this in this way. But like if we think about just a common one like cooking, when your grandmother made a meal, how
Mm-hmm.
many times did you see her checking a book for the quantity of things? She probably didn't. She just threw stuff in there because she knew exactly what to do. So this concept was like how much of our um, comfort foods are lost because we don't write it down. We just make it from feel, from
Mm-hmm.
that love, that passion that comes into again education, coaching, cooking, like these very nuanced things that when you're doing it, you're like, oh, I'm just making French toast. That's it. Like this quantity of cinnamon doesn't get written down. The quantity of like eggs to milk, eggs to whatever you're wanting to put in there, that gets lost in there. And I think to your point, it's getting to witness the author's notes, like mental notes as they're going through it.
Yeah, it's also just it's almost like regional fashions in a way
Mm,
where like, why I'm from Florida, right? Like the US is gigantic and vast, but and I've been to Scotland. I went a few years ago. But like in Scotland people don't dress like they do in Florida.
mm.
You
Could
know,
it freeze?
like you you dress a lot of the sort of culture and styles and things that come out of a hot wet region. You walk outside and you've made 10 decisions already about your day before you ever walked outside, and they're so given that you don't explain them. And likewise, my wife, her family's from Seattle. They wear a lot of flannel. I grew up, no one wore flannel around me. Flannel's hot. It's insulating. We're wearing things that are loose and flowy and allow air and don't hold moisture. And
Mm,
my wife was like, you need a raincoat. I was like, I've never in my life worn a raincoat, like, but it rains every day here. It just
mm.
monsoons for like 30 minutes. It's hard, like it's like God is angry at you type
Yeah.
rain, like, like a,
So I'm from Scotland. Well, I'm not from Scotland. I'm from Portugal, but moved here when I was 9.
mhm.
When I was coaching in the US, I went to Seattle. That's where I was. So
Yeah,
like when I would explain the weather here, like, oh, you're in Seattle, but somewhere else. And I'm like,
yeah,
I mean, if you say so.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So like, but there's all so like as a person from Florida going to Seattle or going to Scotland, like it's y'all have humidity.
Mhm.
It's wet. There's always like a light misty rain. It's a very different rain. It's a very different experience. So yeah, you put on a raincoat or something in either of those locations because you can overcome the rain. Where I'm at, it's like a rain jacket's not going to save you. Like you put on a swimsuit, like you just give in to the fact of I'm going to get wet and I have to deal with that 30 minutes after the rain
Mm,
where the blistering sun comes back and steam just rises like clouds off the ground. But if I were writing about like my tasks for the day, I wouldn't write down the 15 small decisions I made
mm,
taking into account my immediate environment to bring this all back
mhm,
to coaching or a realm that probably your listeners are more interested in than my inane takes on weather. Like it's sort of like people will ask me all the time about programming or something, and well, what would you do? And I'm like, well, there's say like the way that I trained in the large group training that I'm in, and the way that I like to train. They're two different things. If I'm training in a small group or if I was training me or like my child or something, it would look different. And part of it is like it would look different because like when I grew up, I'd say I train a bunch of wrestlers. My wrestlers often have wrestling practice before they come see me, right? So I'm dealing with fatigue that they already have. They've been at school for X amount of hours. There's all the holistic sort of stress load that they are under before they ever get to me. That's not the same in every place. So if I say, do 4 sets of 5 and someone else says, well, I get better results from 3 sets. It's like, sure, of course you do. That doesn't mean that you're wrong or I'm wrong. It means you're dealing with a different set of givens. Like your grandma might have cooked it one way, not because that's how she wanted to cook it, but it's because that's the type of pan that she had. If she had the
mhm,
pan that she wanted, You know, like she might cook it longer, she might cook it faster, she might cook it at a lower temperature. She might be able to manage what part of the pan heated up. But she was solving the equation with the givens before
Mm-hmm.
her. And so it's that like holistic way of looking at where are you and where do you want to go?
Yeah.
Because that's going to determine how you get there. You know,
Mm-hmm.
planes go faster than cars, but renting a car means I don't have to go through TSA or deal with the
Yeah.
airport. Maybe it means I can drive there more directly. I don't have a layover. It's cheaper.
Exactly. And with sort of having experienced the Westside Barbell at such
Hmm.
depth, how has that sort of influenced and carried over to now you coaching high school and how those programs are developed?
Well, at first it was that I tried to take it influences everything because it's sort of like
Ingrained.
it's still it's the most influential sort of like logic system. But again, now it's a different set it's a different set of resources. So applying the same math but now to a different set of resources, the outcome on the other side looks much different, right? So when I'm, you know, say like in the gym with like Dave Hoff, right?
Mm.
Um, I'm good buddies with Hoff and still talk to him regularly, and we talk about training every now and then. And I've seen him train more than almost anybody else. And you know, like if I gave Hoff what I give my kids now, Hoff would break because his outputs are so phenomenally high, right? So like he can hit a threshold where he has to recover from the stimulus and stress that he's able
Mm.
to induce upon himself. And because his weights are so big, that math looks different when he does it versus my, you know, seventh grade girl who just came in and she benches the bar. You know, like she benches the bar. The bar is, even though it feels relatively heavy to her, it is not, in an absolute sense, it is not very much stimulus.
Mm.
So one rep maxes, when your max is the bar, is a very inefficient way to get strong. But when your max is, you know, 600 plus pounds raw, that's a whole lot of stress. And that's, you know, a level of neural efficiency that
Mm.
a one rep is going to be, you know, highly beneficial. And there's, you know, that trying to get my athletes, navigate them to sort of that point along the way where the math starts to flip the system that we use with them.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's
Is
also
there?
you can ask because
Oh, that's all
you
good.
have to rein me in from time to
No,
time.
I, so a lot of coaches ask for that, and I never do because in my head, you can explain something three different ways,
Hmm.
like it being the same thing, but you'll explain it in three different nuanced ways.
Right.
You can take something away from each one, or if one doesn't make sense, the second or third time you explain it, they might look at a different angle and see how you're applying it.
Hmm.
So I will never reel a coach in because I like the stories and the pictures it paints.
Yeah.
So tangents, very for it.
All right. I can't remember where I
Um,
was going at that point. So.
it's all good. I'll ask what I was going to. Um, through all of this, was one unique key concept that you learned that perhaps hasn't been mentioned as much that you still implement to this day, or you still consider it very highly on the importance of it?
Um, there's several, I guess. One of which is a thing that I think was like highly influential to me that I think gets lost on a lot of other people is um is the idea of like work capacity and building it. Again, that it's kind of this putting into context your training, like
Mm,
into context of where are you? You know, like people look at powerlifting influenced methodologies and tend to make assumptions about things like, say, fitness and conditioning, right? Conditioning is not a specific thing. Conditioning is contextual. Nothing. Conditioning doesn't really
No, I
exist.
agree. I agree.
Yeah.
So, and the example I think you're trying to get to is conditioning is relative to what you are doing. So, if you're a power lifter, say, you have three lifts, nine in total. You've got your bench,
Hmm.
squat, deadlift. So, that's one rep each. So, that's
Hmm.
9 reps in total. But if you think about what conditioning actually institutes, it's going beyond and pushing a little bit further, cardiovascular or just muscular endurance type. So, say we've got like 9 lifts, most power lifters will do five fives, they'll
Hmm.
do three fours or some variation of that. So, then if we
What
put
I'm
them,
getting at is like much more basic than that.
okay,
Like you're looking. This is kind of what I'm saying. You're starting to look at like the specifics um of a training model. I'm really getting at, no matter what you do, nothing remains the same. Nothing remains the same. I'm like, this is a statement that transcends everything else. So like the technology does not remain the same. Emotions and feelings do not remain the same. Like you are dying from the moment you are born. You are not the same today. You're not the same in each moment as the next or the one previous. Everything is in flux at all times, and like there is the condition of executing whatever it is that you need to execute at the sort of like your goal condition.
okay,
And then there is where you currently are. And there is an arc to getting from where you are to where you are going. So all of training is conditioning. The
yeah,
act of training is conditioning.
okay, I see
Conditioning
what
is
you
not
got.
a
Yeah,
it's not a separate subset from within. It's not a component of training. It is,
mm,
and when and likewise to look at uh in dealing with like the development of an athlete, everyone wants to be conditioned week one. Like everyone wants to be conditioned immediately. You know, everyone wants execution to be high immediately. Um, Before we hit record, you said, like that one of your wants with one of the things you were talking about was for people to have a place to fail. And it's that like failure is where the precipices of failure is where like the greatest adaptation is made.
yes,
Again, I'm it sounds like I'm talking about strength and conditioning. I am not. I'm talking about everything. When things are
yeah,
true, they repeat. So you learn when challenged. You learn the most right around the point of failure,
hmm,
just above it, just below it. When you fail close enough to see how you could have succeeded, or you just narrowly succeed. That's where, whether we're talking about
yeah,
cognition or no matter what we're talking about, it's that point, that line is where differences are made.
hmm,
And so it's getting to that line. And that means, like there was a story that the late Bob Youngs told. He was one of Dave Tate's friends who used to write for Elite FTS. He was a guy that Dave Tate brought to Westside in the mid 90s, I believe. Um, he had heard about Westside through Dave Tate. Dave Tate brings him in, and he gets there, and Louis kind of stops Bob early. Bob thought he was a strong guy. He was, at the gym that he had been at, he was the strongest guy there. And he goes, Dave's been telling me all about this. I want to get in here and mix it up. I want to show, he wanted to show like how tough he was and how strong he was. He couldn't believe that like there was this whole ecosystem in which everyone was going to be bigger and badder than him. And he gets there, and the first thing that they do is they're doing like, I think, max effort. And he wrote about it. And he said, so he does max effort, and he kind of taps out early. And then Louis tells him, you can go do one accessory, and then you got to leave. And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm here for this like great big epic workout. And Louis said like, no. You're going, like, if you stick around, you're going to get that, but you're not, there's no sense in giving it to you today. And for 3 weeks, he made him do, like the primary exercise, and then like one or two very small, light, like you're going to do one accessory and like a finisher set of bands and leave. And then after like 3 weeks, he allowed him to do a little more. And after 3 weeks, he allowed him to do a little more. And he kept adding workload and he kept adding density, because the first time you do something, it takes you longer to do it. So there's more rest built into it, because you're literally trying to figure out, how do I do this? I'll do this like when we're, I look at the clock a lot as we lift. I'll kind of make a note of like, okay, well, we started at 3:13 today. And then I'll look up and go like, all right, it's 4:17 and these kids are still here. And then in a couple weeks, I'll look up and be like, the room is mostly empty and it's 4:08. They're finished, like they're now finishing like 10, 12 minutes earlier. Well, that's enough time to do another exercise. Right? So now, so they might have gone from, say, 4 exercises the first week of the school year to 3 weeks later, they're doing 5. A few weeks later, they're doing 6, et cetera, so on and so on. To the kids, their experience, they don't look as though it looks like we're flat loading. If you just were to pay attention to their state, their present condition within the workout. But they're doing more and more work. And additionally, they're hitting higher and higher outputs. So now their work capacity has grown, but we've teased out this growth. We never spike it. We never drop it. We try and keep it on this slow growth trajectory as long as we can. Eventually, a kid will get sick. They'll get in trouble for grades. Season will start. They'll hit playoffs, and like something will always happen. But like it's in recognizing like when is the trait most valuable to have, and that's relative to like the expectations of your team. And then how do we build to that? And it's even down to like the kids in 8th grade. We're going to train through everything. I don't care about how conditioned he is for the playoffs. He's in 8th grade. He'll be here. If I do my job, he'll be here with me for 5 years from here. Like, no, he's not getting recruited or going to the Olympics based on. I have a girl who's literally training for 2028. There's no sense in trying to peak her for something right now. That's not to say that we're not incredibly aggressive. She has to be aggressive even to get to 2028. But like we're trying to win the expanse of time, not the moment. A lot of people in all aspects of life, like they will lose forever to win right now. I want to win something meaningful, because when you win something meaningful, you're a winner forever. When you win a state championship, you're a state champion forever. You win a gold medal, you're a gold medalist forever. I tweeted like the other day, like the other side is forever. That's kind of what I'm talking about.
100%. And yes, I was a little slightly off with the conditions. You're talking more about bodily conditions and how we can go from point A to point B over a period of time. Where I was thinking conditioning and is as how conditioned you are to do multiples.
Yeah, I'm talking about the condition and its simplest base form. Again, not really of like when something when things are true, they repeat. When you're on I believe that when you're on a really solid concept, it doesn't just apply to strength and conditioning. It will apply to everything. So it's, when you apply sort of that, it's an economic way of thinking. When you start to apply economics to training, and you really you strip away sort of all ego and emotion from those base words, what you get to underneath are things that really point you and sort of keep you true to serving a principal purpose.
Yeah, no, 100%. And again, our goal, kind of tying back to what I was saying, failing is where growth is, and having spaces where you can fail comfortably and still learn something from it is what's going to, again, if we're talking about conditioning and at its basic form, like the growth happens right at that stage where it's just uncomfortable enough to
Hmm.
develop. So I 100% agree. Um, on that, when you're going from like Westside Barbell to then creating the concept of OVR and how
Hmm.
fast the bar speed moves and the metrics that you can go on, how did that happen? And how, in your head, when you're creating, does that tie into like your past experiences to now?
Yeah. Again, to me, like if you're someone who's like known me for a long time, I don't think anything about this is necessarily like very surprising. Like it seems much more linear. Um, but if you're like sort of picking up in my story like now, then yeah, it seems like there's this weird sort of offshoot to like, okay, films to now OVR. Um,
I'm
but
not just talking about film wise. I'm talking about like the
yeah,
training concepts of West Side, like being embedded in that and that training, that protocol, and now going more into a movement speed analysis.
yeah. Well, so again, most of while making the movie, the parts that were really the most interesting to me were the parts that had nothing to do with the movie. It was talking to, you know, it was talking to like say track coaches who would come in and they're talking to Louis because they know like, okay, Louis the best at getting people stronger. They're like, I need to get my guy stronger. And Lou would say, "Well, you do this," and they'd say, "No, no, no, no." But he's a sprinter, and Lou would go like, "Yeah, that's cool. So like the you have different time parameters, but here's how strength works, and so now here's the concept that you're trying to build, and here's how you consider your different parameters of mostly time. All sort of outputs and adaptations are a matter of like." A postural necessity. You have to be X strong out of Y position within Z time. Like that's the majority of it. And then maybe, an additional variable of, and you have to be able to repeat it this many times. But in every individual moment, you need to be capable of this output in these angles in this fraction of time. And so seeing, because again, like I was so familiar with like this sort of standard West Side template. I was so familiar with even applying that to like football, which is not very hard. Um, but then listening to like, okay, now how do you apply it to sprinting? How do you apply it to jumping higher? And I started to, Louis pointed me in the direction of some coaches and was like, you got to check out this guy. He's got, this guy, he pointed me to, let's say, like Brandon Bird, and he goes, this guy's, middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. He's got 5 kids who jump on 70-inch boxes. That's unheard of. Who's got that? No one lives out there. He's like, that's a system.
Yeah.
So, and then I talked to Brandon. I talked to Brandon near daily, and Louis says like he's doing the same thing as me, but his population is different. He's working with longer, leaner athletes, and they're jumping really high and they're running incredibly fast. And in talking to Bird, he's talking about how he conjugates his jumps and how he uses these different variations, which all build sort of a central jump. And I'm listening to it. I'm like, that's the same way that Louis talks about, say, building a deadlift or building a squat, right? Like the variables are arbitrary. And again, coming from like the film sort of background, I put the WPO on ESPN in 2019. So I put Multiply Powerlifting on ESPN, and the crews that I hired to do that with me, I hired a lot of people who had done track and field for NBC for the Olympics. And to them, they were like, oh yeah, I've done CrossFit, I've done track, I've done basketball, I've done this sport, this sport, this sport, this sport. All it is how big is the space? Where do I have to put the cameras? How much time do we have to fill? Again, it's this similar means of like, you just tell me the parameters and I'll set up the tools in accordance. And that's how we'll solve this math. And so everyone was caught up in the parameters of what Louis was doing. And what I thought was interesting was the actual tool, and seeing when like edge cases would come in, and coaches who thought that they had very extreme needs, and watching as Louis would say like, well, here's how you consider the variable changes. And now here's how this same math reconstructs differently. So then I moved back home to Tallahassee, and somebody reaches out to me about training a local high school football team. And I was like, well, man, I've just spent like 5 years basically like every day learning about this stuff, and the things that I had done when I was younger, but now really learning about like the hows and whys of what was really happening. And now it's like I have all this theory and stories of application about like, how do you get someone faster? And now someone comes to me and is like, hey, I got like 100 athletes that want to get faster. Do you have any interest in that? And I'm like, yeah, I've got like 100 athletes that want to get explosive. Do you have any interest in that? I'm like, yeah. I have like 100 kids who want to get stronger. Do you have any interest in that? And I was like, yeah, this is awesome. And so I started to look at, I again, through all the coaches that I knew at that point, I was like, well, some of them have they have jump mats, and they have VBT, and they have timing gates and all these things. And so I bought some. I had some Netflix money burning a hole in my pocket, and I bought nice toys for my kids as I go into coach, and they're loving it. But I wasn't loving a lot of the technology. And I was like, why is this? I paid a lot of money for this stuff, and I don't like how it works. And a lot of it didn't feel like finished products. And I was like, I just raised a bunch of money I just put Multiply Powerlifting on ESPN. I just raised money to, make a Multiply Powerlifting documentary that everyone told me was going to fail. And it debuted number 2 on iTunes and Amazon. It debuted top 5 in the world on Netflix. And I was like, I've done crazier things than this. And I happened to have a business partner at the time who was like, have you ever thought about anything like outside of sort of the hardcore lifting space? And I was like what? And he's like, what if we did something like more geared towards, I don't know, like regular sports or like football? And he mentioned combines. And I was like, I'm doing something right now. I was like, I want to show you what we're doing. And so I brought him down to our gym and showed him what I was doing with the kids. And he was like, this is awesome. Like, is there a business model here? And I was like, and I just sort of like immediately started whiteboarding, like, what if it worked this way? And then shortly after, I met my partner, Adam, who does a lot of the heavy lifting for OVR. And he was a college athlete, who had an engineering background. And, from there, it suddenly we were, off to the races and testing devices and whatnot. But it was really born out of like being a customer and a consumer first and being dissatisfied. So it was starting from the place that I think that a lot of people forget. Like, you have to solve a problem first. Like, how do you find value? Solving problems is valuable. Like, too many people try to manufacture value rather than like perceived value rather than just providing value. I don't care about the sort of cost or price associated to the value. I care about providing the value first and foremost. Because if you do that, like, are you going to leave some pennies on the table every now and then? Yeah. But are you going to have, again, it's like zooming out that scale of how do you actually measure your success and progress? If you zoom out, like, are you going to have, if you do things that solve problems, you are always going to have a stable flow of people who are going to be grateful that you are solving a problem so that they don't have to.
Yeah.
And
I think this kind of goes back into that thing of our biggest issue in life is the time that we have.
Mm-hmm.
It's very limited. So when you're coaching and having to take athletes from point A to point B, you have to have the shortest systems to make sure that
Mm-hmm.
they still get everything that they need. And again, this podcast is sponsored by TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr is like an all-in-one inclusive platform where coaches program and everything sort of goes into like your force plates go into it, your BBTs can go into it, and then when you're on the back end coaching, all these systems are already built in your platform, so that like as soon as you go in, you just coach. Like that is it. And like I like to think of equipment that I buy as time savers. Like if it saves me time, like if it fixes my process, my systems, that's a sign of a good product. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've got some force plates and I've got some jump mats. More times than not, I just use my jump mats. Like
Mm-hmm.
you step on, jump, stand off, and you can repeat that really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, systems can be built for force plates, but all in all, a jump mat is quicker than a force plate.
Yeah, I was gonna say like it's that same line, and it's also like one of the things with OVR that I think makes us special is there's a number of technology companies out there, and everyone like there's I don't think there's anyone out there who's like just making stuff that like just doesn't work under any
Mm-hmm.
circumstance. But the sort of initial lens that we make things from is we're thinking about, like we're thinking about things from that angle of being things that seamlessly integrate into your training. Like it's
Yeah.
training first versus I think a lot of other, sort of pieces of equipment in the same space. It's almost like they're thinking about it from like a lab setting first,
Mm-hmm.
and then like when you try and use it within the weight room, it's like,
It's
it's
clunky and laggy.
yeah, it just is. It,
So
it's
I've
like
got a
this would
theory.
work great if your whole like training thing weren't in the way, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
ours is like just the attitude is like, what would help
Mm-hmm.
you get through this? You're training all the time. What would help you get through your training better? Like
Okay.
those are the
Yeah.
design considerations.
I have a theory on this, and again, going back to TeamBuildr,
Hmm.
TeamBuildr works because it's created by coaches. Like
Hmm.
everyone on the roster has been a coach at some point or is still coaching.
Hmm.
OVR, you are coaches. You have built this system because you have been through the ringer. And you know what it's like when you've got a 50 kid session, but sometimes 60 could turn up. And you're like, well,
Hmm.
what is happening here? Or vice versa. You've got a 60 kid roster coming in, only five come up. Like, what do you do then? How adaptable? How quick can you take things apart so it's still running as smoothly as possible? I think that's where great strength and conditioning or equipment companies go right, is when they employ the right people to make that coaching decision. Like, okay, when I was a coach, this was my pain point. Let's fix that.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's what I attribute a lot of our success to. That's like it's sort of again going back to that, like the value provided is based on the problem solved.
Mm,
And if you're not intimately aware of the problem, your likelihood of providing an effective solution, and it's chance. um but yeah, I think that you can definitely tell the
mhm.
things that are are built by coaches and the things that are built. um
By scientists.
yeah, the things that are built by scientists feel like they are built for
Mhm,
scientists.
mhm,
It's not so much a knock. It's like in LA people say like write what you know.
mhm.
It's all business, sort of all people just in general should work that way. Like
I promised myself I wouldn't go on this run again, but here we are. Um, so I think, again, I'm from a sports science, strength and conditioning background. I'm in Europe where we are very science heavy. Like if
Hmm.
you don't know how to analyze or if you don't know how to carry out these specific protocols, you're getting left behind. So I know that end. But because of my coaching experience in the US, I also know how to coach. So when now I read like research papers or very specific things that, I mean, you can tell when a researcher hasn't stepped foot in the weight room ever to coach.
Hmm.
Like, and that's fine. Like if if your interest is like, hey, what's the best protocol to scientifically get 1 RMs stronger? Cool. I'm fine with that. But like when they're making considerations for like, okay, this is my advice on how you get athletes stronger, but they've never stepped foot in the gym. First
Hmm.
of all, we don't have lab rats in the gym. It's as uncontrollable can get. You know yourself, you'll sometimes get your highest performance athletes coming in and there's nothing to them.
Hmm.
And then you ask, hey, have you ate today? No. Have you drunk water today? No. How's family life? Had an argument with my whole family. Cool. That 1 RM protocol doesn't mean shit to the athlete right now.
Right.
And again, Thomas Newman, his wife, who's also worked at Yale, Rachel Newman, she had this great concept that she introduced to Tom, and it was sometimes you need to give them 3 by 5 hugs,
Hmm.
right? Where it's just like you just come in, it's a little bit padded work. Let's just move. Let's just find some ranges. Let's just foam roll. Let's just do something to at least keep you moving. Tomorrow we can attack it. And again, I'm a great believer of like if you've programmed 90% for the athlete that session and he comes in not being able to, if he gives me 90% of his RPE, I'm just as happy for that day. It's like, yes, the stimulus isn't the same, but the effort is still the same for them. And they're
Hmm.
still going to make some adaptations, and I'm okay with that. So it's again, it's context and it's knowing how they're coming in and how you can use your equipment, your tonality, your everything around you to make sure that that athlete gets what they're needed.
Hmm. Yeah. It all again. It comes down to something that I wanted to say earlier before we were recording. Like the tools that every coach has are are different, and this is why sort of studies and the like number one, humans are we have really long lifespans, and you can't we have too much literal self-determination in this world. We're not good subjects for study. And the problems for like a performance athlete are not the same as like to say do a study and figure out something about sprinting.
Mm.
Well, it's what level of sprinter?
Yeah.
Like you have to be out in the field to know what the valuable questions to ask are. Um, Studies they do not, like on principle, they don't tell you what can happen. They only tell you what did happen.
Mm.
You know, it, and
But even to that, what did happen are controlled variables.
right, but it had controlled variables. Was it? So like there's things that I see all the time about like I'll look at a study and it'll say something about like jump performance, and like they saw a 2.8% increase in jump performance, and I'll read through and I'll go like, okay, well, it was once again it was 12 rugby players. I don't know, rugby players seem to be the most studied people on earth. Like there's some sort of government system that is uh, like there's some sort of government assistance network that is just helping rugby players to pay their rent just internationally through these small studies everywhere. You know, say like 12 high level athletes, and you'll go look like what. One thing is just clarifying that language and what your terms are, because a high level athlete, again, you know, if you're talking about a high level athlete in the U.S., our highest level athletes are very, very high. You know, like, are you talking about like a 26-year-old, you know, professional level athlete in a major sport in the U.S.? Because we don't have a lot of like farm and developmental systems. So you're either cream of the crop or you're amateur. There's not a lot in between. Versus in other countries, those systems are different, where the apex of the mountain is much lower and it's sort of much broader. There's a lot more opportunities to say that you are a professional athlete in certain sports in certain regions, which wouldn't raise to that same, it's like not reflective of the same type of population in the US. So to say like, you know, oh, well, these professional rugby players, are we talking about like physical prime? Like, if you're giving me a 12-person sample size, are you pulling from the Apex League in that region where they are true professionals? Or are these guys who are working at their local gym as a personal trainer in their down hours or doing Uber or like, because I don't know what's going on. Are they true pros where this is their life and their devotion, their sort of singular thing? You know, like Tyreek Hill is not running a second job in between the NFL. You know, LeBron is not doing a second. So it's like, oh, it'd be great if you could do tests on those guys, but you can't test them. Additionally, like, I know that if I can get you a 2% increase on a jump easily, like give me 5 minutes and I don't care what shape the athlete is. I can get them to jump significantly higher. Like what's the total environment there? And how many times did you jump them? Because I know that I'll jump my kids 4 times in a week, at the beginning of the workout and at the end. So like if they're a new athlete, oh, this is a fun one. If they're a new athlete with a low work capacity, they will jump better. Or let's say last week my athletes were coming in at 10 a.m., right? At 10 a.m., if they jump at the beginning of their workout, they're probably going to be an average of 2.5 inches lower than if they jump at 12 p.m. at the end of their workout. Likewise with their sprinting, because it's the morning, so their arousal level is low. This week, they're coming out of school. They're coming out of seeing their friends and seeing the pretty girls again for the first time. Their arousal level is going to be pretty high. So at 3 p.m., they're wide awake. It's warmer. They've been up longer. They're going to jump better at the beginning of the workout. They're still going to jump better at the end. The ones who've been consistent with me. The ones who are new, they might jump 2 inches lower at the end. The ones who have been with me for a while, who have that work capacity, the entire workout is going to act as a warm-up for them and potentiation. They're going to jump 3 inches higher at the end of the workout because they have a work capacity that sustains that. But the same athlete a couple months earlier with a lower work capacity will jump worse at the end of the workout than they did at the beginning. But they might jump better if I'm lining it up with their dynamic effort waves. My most elastic, you know, my best athletes, my sort of genetic specimens, they will jump their best week 1. Week 1, we're moving lighter weights faster. We're doing loaded jumps with a lighter percentage. So all of the sort of windows of potentiation are slimmer, you know, slimmer time under tension, crisper, tighter ground contacts. They're going to jump higher. My worst athletes are going to jump lower on those weeks. Week 2 in the middle, if you're thinking again, like tying this to like a dynamic effort wave. So when we're moving, you know, 0.9 meters per second on week 1 and, you know, 75% top weight or something, like traditional Westside sort of definitions, which are extremely fast and young kids cannot do. Young kid's not going to move that much weight that fast, but an experienced lifter can. But that middle week, that's when most of my kids are going to PR. It's week 2. They're going to hit their all-time best jumps on week 2, and then they're going to regress slightly on week 3. But then we'll go back into week 1, and then back into week 2, they'll progress. So we'll measure like week 3 versus week 3, week 1 versus week 1, week 2 versus week 2.
Okay.
And then my
Yeah.
worst athletes will, on the heaviest week, they'll have the most potentiation because they need more. They don't jump as high, so they also have access to the ground for longer durations, and they have lower rates of force development, so they don't convert
Yeah.
it as well. But
Mhm.
I know that if I jump the same kid, 4 days in a row, let's say one day they jump 29.9, the next day they might jump 30.6, the next day they might jump 30.2, the next day they might jump 32.6. Now if I started my study on one of those days where he was jumping 29 and I ended it on one of those days where he was jumping 32.6, oh my gosh, the same kid
Mhm.
looks amazing. Like, look at that. Or if I started it on a 32.6 day and then I caught it, came back around, it's like these studies to me are largely meaningless unless you see very drastic changes
Mhm.
over a very long period. It's like if you get a baseline number, but you just do it one day, it's
Yep.
a bad
So
study.
I always check the methodologies first. Like that is the first
Yeah.
thing I do. Like I'll read a little bit of the abstract. I'll see what the results were, and then I check the methodologies because that's going to tell me if it's applicable or not. Like I read a research paper that tested athletes' leg strength. So it was female athletes on their menstrual cycle and off their menstrual cycle.
Mm-hmm.
One was tested one leg, the other tested the other leg. So say period on the left, not period on the right, on a leg press. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
When is the last time that you tested your athletes on a leg press? You don't. So like to
Right.
me, like okay, I you want to understand the physiological um, impact of the menstrual cycle, and you're going to test one leg to the other. Well, first of all, one leg is going to be stronger than the other, regardless,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's asymmetries. Everyone has them. How do you mitigate that? Well, leg press. There's lunges. There's other
Mm-hmm.
exercises that are a little bit more specific to what they might be doing that can really say, hey, she's actually not as strong on her left leg. Well, I'm testing them on their period on their left leg. That's a double whammy. So that massive difference can be from that. And it's kind of like what you're alluding to. It's like the context behind what you're testing also matters. Like if
Mm-hmm.
I take a massive result, like you said, and they jumped 32, and then on the last week they had a really shitty day, but they jumped 29, my protocol failed and what I wanted it to do. So it's, yeah, I have a great love for pushing against research papers. I will say though,
Yeah.
Paul Comfort, amazing researcher. He is about it. If you see
Mm-hmm.
his work, he's dope because he's a coach,
Yeah.
and he's like the lead of Salford University. So it's like, and
Yeah.
every student that goes through him gets through the same ringer. They have to be a coach. They
Mm-hmm.
have to be a coach, and they have to do what they're saying.
Yeah. It's also, I have, so like I was at NSCA, um, NatCon a few weeks ago, and like all the kids have their in the middle of the conference, they've all got their research papers and stuff put up there, and I looked at some of them, and again, my background is wholly unlike most people within this field, right? Like I don't have any formal academic background within strength and conditioning. Um, but as I was, and I talked to, um, I talked to one kid in particular about his paper because it was looking at something that I had dug into about 15 years ago when I was at the NFL, and he was saying, so they draw this conclusion, and I said, like, do you understand why they run that test? I said,
Mm,
did you talk to any scouts about what they try to conclude from that test? And he said, no. And I said, okay, well, here's the secret there. I said, like, have you ever looked at, I don't want to like throw him under the bus or anything because number one, like he's very young,
Mhm.
right? This is again a
It's a
problem
novice.
sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a novice. So like he had some great points within his paper. But it was like some pretty good questions pulled from basically zero experience.
Mm.
And I was like, if you had more experience, you could have asked the actual, like, you would have asked a different question, and you also would have graded, like, you wouldn't have compared what you compared, you would have graded it against something else,
Mhm.
because I've already done this. And if you graded it against this quality over here, I said you would come to a radically different outcome. And suddenly that thing that you think is non-predictive at all is incredibly predictive. It's another thing we're like off air, I'll tell you. But
Okay.
it was, and I was like, this is. I just thought about like how much research is out there from, I have a lot of friends who've gone through high level academics in various fields, and they've all done research papers, but most of them they publish something while, say, getting their doctorate, and then they never publish again. And you're like, what is the percentage? I don't actually know how this academic life cycle goes, but what percentage of research papers are done basically as just facilitating the standards of getting their academic certifications versus the ongoing research within the field.
I will also tell you something at the end regarding that.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of a broken system to
Yeah.
put it a little bit more bluntly, because again, to become a well-known university for something,
Hmm.
your papers have to be a 3-star or above.
Hmm.
So that research is very nuanced, very niche, but it's hard to do because it's easier to confirm a finding than to create a whole new system itself. So I think
Hmm.
that's where most researchers. I need to be careful with what I'm saying, but because of me being like a more mature student when I went through university, which I highly recommend.
Hmm. How
Um,
old are you?
29.
29. Yeah, see,
Yeah.
this is, you are like an example of what I think the system should be, where just in general, again, speaking as like an American and seeing the education system from here, the number of people, we're herded into universities at 18 years old,
Mhm. It's
and
the same
you're
here.
asked, yeah, and you're asked, like, educate yourself for a thing that you've never done, that you anticipate doing for the next 20 plus years. It's a foolish premise, because basically within 2 years, you either are working in the field that you studied for, or you never do again. Like, you either, it doesn't take a whole lot of time, like, and you also, like, there's no concept of like, what, you know, what, uh, what lifestyle do you actually want to lead, and
Mhm.
what
There's
things do you actually need out of a job.
mhm. They're
um
still young, and
yeah,
again, so I
and you don't have a frontal lobe, like, that's
yep,
it's crazy. So like,
yep.
you don't even know who
So
you are yet.
I so the process I much rather experience than a piece of paper.
Hmm.
I've said that before. I will say that always, because so the way I did it was I went to high school. In the UK, strength and conditioning isn't a like it wasn't a job at that point. Like you can
Hmm.
work in gyms, but like that's rare. So like it really wasn't a option for people.
Hmm.
So what I did was after high school, I worked like a menial factory job in my local town. Hated it, like burning passion. Hated it. I got sacked. I got fired from there, and it's the best thing that's ever happened in my life, like ever,
Hmm.
because that was the kick up the ass that I needed to be like, okay, let me get my gym qualifications, right? So I just went to the local college. applied for the summer program. I think I was already late for the application, but it took me on anyways. So passed the test, got into college, um, did my qualifications. I then took 2 years of experience where I worked in a public gym. So I was getting everyone and anyone to exercise. I was doing fitness classes. I was doing everything I could to learn practical experience. After those 2 years, I went did an entry coaching course to then be able to get into university. So during my university time, I worked like full time, like in a gym. So I was getting my education, but then I was learning how to apply it. In my third year, that's when things ramped up a little bit, and I got accepted to an opportunity in the US. Summer internship, University of Washington, Ron McKeefery, and it's kind of like what you were saying about like the movie director and the coach. Like I had read his books, but I hadn't associated it with him. So like when
Hmm.
I first got the call saying I was with him, I was like, oh cool, Ron McKeefery. Don't know who that is, but hey, anyways, move on. Until I then jumped on a call with him, and I put two and two together. I was like, shit, you're the author, Ron McKeefery. He was like, yeah. Oh shit. And that's like when
Hmm.
everything clicked. I've told him this story a couple times now, and we laugh about it all the time. Um, but it's that thing of like I built my education around experience. Like
Hmm.
everything that I speak about, I have done. If I program 5x5 squats, I have done them. If I
Hmm.
build out conditioning, like the true sense of cardiovascular work conditioning, and I do like a 10-10-12s, like 10 seconds on, 10 seconds off, 12 times, 4 minute rounds. We'll do like two or
Hmm.
three. I have done them. I know how much it sucks. So for me, like experience was a big piece, and having that sucky job where I know I don't want to go back to lit that fire under my ass. That's like I have to make this work. And again, that's maturity. That's like my frontal lobe coming in to
Hmm.
play. And again, I do think that people go into university too soon after high school. I
Hmm.
think we should probably develop a little bit first, like get experience in something, um, to then when we do go and make these like big financial decisions early on when we don't know what they mean, it would make it so much more impactful later down the line.
Yeah, I think it should be normalized at least like I think people should take probably like 2 years, like even if you're still living with your parents,
Hmm.
take 2 years, go just go get a job.
Hmm.
Just go get a job and develop some sense, like go get a job and get a gym membership. Like go do those two things. Even if you have the financial supports of like your parents, you start looking at like, let's say again, it's like let's say you work at like McDonald's or you work at a car wash or something. It's like you at least get a sense of like, you know what? I know what I want I know what I want in a profession. I don't like I've met a ton of people who, they went to school for one thing and then they ended up being happy as like a bartender, later on down the line. They went to school for one thing and then they hated it and they went to school for something like me where it was like, something like film where the idea was, like, oh, I'm going to do this big grand artistic endeavor and they hated it and they were like, you know what I like, working 9 to 5 and shutting my mind off when I'm done.
Hmm.
Like I like the freedom, like give me, I don't want to be totally engrossed in my work 24/7 even if
Yeah.
I like it. Like it's, you know and then again, the transitions in like your late 20s. I had a job that I loved when I was 24 and I was like, this is amazing. And for 5 months it was
Yeah.
working on some travel channel stuff and I traveled all over and then just hit like a wall of like, I suddenly realized like no one who I work with is over 30. Like everyone gets burned out of this very quickly. And I was like, okay, I can't make a career doing this. My enjoyment of this job, nothing stays the same. My enjoyment of this job will not, is unlikely to continue. Now, coaching, I can't imagine hitting a point in my life cycle where like I don't like coaching. I see a lot online, like a lot of people say, you know, like, well, you gotta, one thing that irritates me about this sort of industry is people sort of on the very front end saying like, well, you gotta get your, you know, like you gotta get your side hustle or something going. You gotta get the secondary thing going because like you're not gonna want to be working the floor coaching forever. And I'm like, no, I think I think that you should. I think, you know, like, and maybe I'm biased just because like my dad still coaches. Um, you know, he's effectively retired and still coaches. Louis coached until the very end. I've watched many people get in their 60s, 70s, etc. You know, like I worked on a Bobby Bowden documentary, and I went to Florida State when Bobby was still the head coach in his 80s. You know, like some people coach until the day that they die. You know, that doesn't have to be everyone, but then again, a lot of people are, you know, choose to be a coach, and I don't think they know what that means, and I don't think that they want to do it. And it's a very difficult sort of job to financially and economically make work if it's not like truly your passion and sort of your calling. So
100%.
if it's not something that you associate as being your purpose, like then I just generally think with certain jobs you shouldn't be. And I say all this like as someone with OVR and with residuals from movies and stuff. Like I could easily be used as the poster child against what I'm saying, but my entire goal is to be able to coach for free, which is what I do now, forever, and not have to
So
like lean on it.
I look at a similar way, whereas I'm trying to build a business around so that I can spend more time coaching. And it's kind
Yeah.
of like my use for applications and my use for equipment. I want to make the programs as specific and as tailored as possible, but still be involved in every aspect of it. Like my mission in life is to wake up, go to the gym, do my coaching, go home, spend time with the kids, go to sleep, do it all over. Like for me, that coaching, like if coaching was like a traditional 9 to 5 where you go in, you coach, and then you spend time with your family, like that would be, that's my goal, is to like be able to be comfortable everywhere else so that I can spend time coaching. I can spend my time doing what I love. And I think that's, and again, it is mentalities. And when you're like, I've been in performance, high performance since I was 13. Like I started, like my first strength and conditioning start was at 13. At 14, I started helping with the coaching. So like it's something that's like it's carried through my whole life. So like I don't know anything different. Like
Yeah.
performance is performance. Like that's what we do. So for me, it's I want to have that space where athletes come in 9 to 13s to 15s, 19s, 20s, whatever age they come in, and know that the time that they're there, my time is theirs. Like that is what's happening, and I think it's a mentality. It's not just making ends meet, because like if that's all you're in this industry for, you're going to struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It's not an industry that pays well,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But if you make things around it to be able to, like what you're saying, like have coaching for free, that is amazing. Like if we, and I always say, like if money wasn't a thing in the world, I would still be doing this thing.
Right.
It's yeah, it's. I think it's a lot to do with mentality, and it kind of goes back to we're probably a little bit too young when we go to university and make these big decisions.
Yeah. There's I see a lot. You know, it's sort of like when I moved out to LA. I had never been to LA before. I had never, you know, my only conceptions of Hollywood were like what I saw on Entourage on HBO. And like that's how a lot of I think that's how a lot of people more than they're willing to admit sort of base a lot of their major life decisions on is sort of, you know, like you can't it's almost like, some people say like opinions are like assholes, everyone's got one. I don't think
Mhm.
that everyone has an opinion. I think that a lot, like, I think it's fair to say probably the vast majority of opinions are not held, but like they're rented, borrowed,
Regurgitated.
shared.
Yeah.
Yeah, like maybe a few people have like a real opinion where it's based on a combination of like curiosity and experience, and they have an opinion. You know, um, I've never been to Portugal. If you ask me about Portuguese food, I
Amazing.
shouldn't I shouldn't tell you anything. I shouldn't tell you an opinion at all because I have no experience and I've never thought about Portuguese food until saying this sentence. So it would be like unjust or untruthful for
Mhm.
me to even offer an opinion. But everyone wants to feel included about everything, so everyone
Mhm.
does offer an opinion. And it's like, but your opinion can't be about Portuguese food because you have no context to even place an opinion on top of.
Mhm.
And people do that with themselves, their own idea of themselves. They say, yeah, at 18 years old, they're like, sports science. Oh, those are two cool words.
Mhm.
Yeah, like I'll make that my thing. And they don't know what they are, and then they just decide I'm that thing. They have no clue what they're signing up for. Then they get out into the world and like they don't know the difference between sports scientist and coach. There shouldn't be, in my opinion, a whole lot of difference. Sports scientists just like operating in a void, unconnected to everything. It's like, who is that helping, right? Like, who is the sports? Every science should be serving some sort of application. So if you're uh, not understanding of that application, it's who are you helping? Um, but like there's people who decide like I'm gonna be a coach. I'm gonna go be a coach, and they make an Instagram. They start doing like floating head videos and stuff, and
Mhm.
they're suddenly they're worried about like their
Has that been
follower
bothering you as
counts.
well? Has that been bothering you as well?
Um, yeah, I wouldn't say that it bothers me. I enjoy people watching a whole lot. So there's things that like I would never do. Like they're not
Mhm.
my vibe. Um, like they're things that like make me feel old. I'm like I'm 38. Um, I'm often accused of being like far younger than that for some reason. I've got enough gray in my beard now that like people are starting to buy it. Of like oh you've been around for a while. Like I might be
Mhm.
new to you, but it doesn't mean that I'm new, right? Like my existence predates your perception of it,
Yeah.
or it operates independently of your perception of it. Um, but I just see all the time where I know like there's a particular story of a coach who I was told in long ago, like if I would talk to them. This was before I was coaching, and when I was working in media still, and somebody came to me and said like, hey man, would you mind like taking a call from this guy? He's coaching but he hates it. He wants to go do this other thing. He wants to work in media. I was like, yeah, sure, like I'll have lunch with him, he'll talk, whatever. I'll try and point him to some. If you say he's a good guy, then he's a good guy. I'll try and help him out. And the dude never reached out to me, which I don't like. It wasn't him soliciting me, so I don't care that he didn't reach out to me. Um, People get busy, that's fine. But I watched as all of a sudden he got popular on social media. And I was like, I already know that you absolutely hate this.
Mm.
And, it's been almost 10 years, and you can tell in his content that he does not like this, but he's got a substantial following. So he keeps putting stuff out. And it's like, well, I also knew that he wanted to, work in media. So I knew that the following, the lights, the camera, the glitz, I knew that that was what was attracting him. And and I had lots of other friends who, my sort of age cohort, like I had friends who were very popular, like proto influencers, like the first kind of round of people who were getting paid to make content. And some of
Mm.
them made lots of money. And they were making money on this brand new thing, and no one knew about the life cycle of it. no one knew that like what you're doing today, you're getting all this attention and all this money, but in 18 months, maybe your audience shifts and no one wants to give you any money anymore. But now you've developed like a taste for the attention. And I saw that and I was always like terrified of it. I was like, you know, if I want attention, I'll make a movie and I'll put myself in the movie. You know, that being said, the last movie that I anticipate making is going to have my voice narrating it.
Nice.
That is mostly a cost thing. And also because my dream was to have Anthony Bourdain narrate it. And so I like literally was like, I'm going to write this thing for him to narrate. And because I knew how to get in touch with him. And then he died. And I was like, oh, I was very excited to write it for him because my sort of writing style and his writing style, I thought like, this will sound right coming from him. Yeah. And now it's like, well, it's very cheap and I can still write it the way that I wanted to write it if I just do the voiceover. So I'll do the voiceover, but my face will not be in it. And like aside from that, like I don't like calling sort of attention to myself in certain ways. But I saw that and I was like, I would hate to be that person who like feels so attached to like sort of just an arbitrary assumption they made about themselves, and that they're afraid to let go of that assumption to go have an opportunity to do a thing that they really want to do. You know, it's the same as like I had other offers to continue making movies, and you know, it was just that like I was like I don't actually enjoy this anymore. The fun parts of it, you know, and like having a family and stuff, I was like, I don't want to be away from my family like that. I don't want to work those hours anymore. I don't want to do those things. And then I tried coaching, which I thought when I was younger was something that like, it was presented as something that was so accessible to me that I like devalued it greatly. And I looked at it like kind of shamefully as like, well, that would be just such an easy, obvious thing for me to do that if I did it, it must be me like settling in some weird way. And that's an irrational way to look at it, but it's the same way that most people look at like the place that they're from or their hometown. And, again, it's that idea of like my identity and your perception of me are different. My identity and where I'm from are different. Like, so you can be from a bad place and be a good person. You can, you know, be a bad person in a good place. You can like, but above all else, that you can decide sort of how to value your own existence.
So I've got 2 points in this, and back to an earlier thing that you were saying is I think people are no longer comfortable being in silence.
Yes.
Like when we're talking about our opinions, our things, it's like it's instant. Like you have to come up with a point about that specific topic. But and again, the art of talking is losing. The art of communication is losing. Like we're losing these skills that are fundamental to our growth. Like I read a book, I think it's in the office actually. I think it's called Let's Talk, and it's based on this BBC radio host that has had some of the most inspirational and just people from like really like war torn countries. And it's this thing of like you don't always have to speak. Like you don't always have to say something. You can just sit and take in what is being said. Think about what you're going to say. Take your time with it, and then say it. Like you don't have to just reply straight away. Oh, like you're from Florida. I've never been to Florida, but I know that there's an influence on more Latin-based countries. So that to me would suggest like there's a lot of spices, there's a lot of sauces. Like I've had those, but I'm not going to claim, oh, I know what food in Florida is like. I would be like, oh, what's it like? Like, what can you tell me about it? Describe it to me. Then I get a better sense so that when I do go, I can be like, okay, Michael told me about this place. Let me go. Let me see what it's talking about. Let me see what it's about. And then that's how you build these viewpoints and again, it's just allowing yourself to be in silence and be like, hey, I don't know everything about it. You tell me about it. You know about it. Tell me, what's it like? And I think we're very caught up on this. My view and my point has to matter and has to be right all the time. It's not. Like humans
Mm-hmm.
aren't right. Like we're not designed right. Like I might really like spicy food. You might hate spicy food. That doesn't mean that it's bad or worse or good or bad. Like it's just what it is. And then my second point is when we're coaching, we have this ability to influence our athletes, and that will come strictly from the way that they see us interacting with them. Like even if it's not noticed, athletes will end up being like, "There's something off here. Like there
Mm-hmm.
is something not right." So if you're a coach that doesn't like what he's doing, your kids at some point will notice and they will turn, and
Mm-hmm.
then you're not doing jack shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that is again one of the things it's when people ask me about, like my program or all these different things, I'm always quick to kind of like couch things and say like I am able to do this. I'm able to, like I am able to get my athletes to do XYZ in large part because of me,
Mm.
like because of the sort of individual,
It's a
collection
very,
of
yeah,
yeah,
relationship.
the
It's just how you come across to them. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I'm like, you can't. I'm like, number one, like, if you're not a large male, that's visually just the initial interaction, initial buy-in and stuff. Like, I'm a small sort of giant. I'm a very big person. I loom over them. So, like, right away there, that adds a thing that is not, not necessarily reproducible. But by the same token, I'm not like still incredibly athletic or something, like um, I'm athletic now only in a relative sense, like relative to other 38-year-olds, relative to other large 38-year-olds, you know. But I like I like talking. I have sort of a playful relationship with awkwardness. I
Mhm.
like to say like I revel in awkwardness. I'll just walk up next to a kid and just stand there next to him. Not say a single thing, just be shoulder to shoulder next to him for a while until until they're laughing like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I
Mhm.
don't know, man. I'm just seeing how you're doing. What are you doing?" I'm playful in a way that not everyone is. I'm genuinely like very excitable about all of this stuff. Like when a kid has a question, I am eager. Like
Mhm.
I'm thrilled.
Pump.
It makes my
Yeah.
day when a kid has a question. But it's in part because I have the answers, right? Like it reaffirms my purpose when they have a question. I've got the answer for them, so I can return value to them immediately, and that makes me feel great. If you don't operate that same way, you can't like play that card. I can also, I I like, sort of using my tone and my voice, and I can also drop my tone and look a kid straight in the eyes and say, like, this is what's going to happen. You're going to see this. You're going to feel this. Here's what's going to happen. And when you feel that fight, you're not going to quit. You're going to squeeze the bar. You're going to drive out. You're going to drive out. The bar's going to raise half an inch, and all of a sudden, you're going to have the leverage. You have to keep fighting. Float
Mhm.
through. Boom, you're at the top. And like this way to like pull a kid in where it's like you can sort of suck all of the air out of the room and make everything about this very small proximity to them
Mhm.
that's hyper intense, and then they get through it and it's like all of a sudden they're released back into the real world going like,
Yeah.
holy crap, I just did that. If you don't know how to do that, I can't like over the phone tell you. I
Mhm.
there are things that I'm like, okay, well, I know that I can do this, but I still don't know how to teach this. So
Yep.
like I'm not going to give you coaching points based on unique sort of oddities and quirks of my personality. I remember a million things like
Mhm.
every, I'm
Every
like
second of the
if
day.
yeah, if you're if you're neurotypical, you can't do what I do. So like, you know, that's sort of the spice and sauce that goes into things. And it's likewise, like you might have skills and traits and things that come easy and natural to you that I can't do. So like, you know, so in that sense, it's like you or I in the same position. Neither one of us should be expected to ever get the exact same results. Both of us should connect with different kids easier or with more struggle. Like it's again, it's just as you consider all of those external givens, it's the internal givens too that are hard to translate. But by the same token, it like you know, I think that a lot of coaches, they don't elevate themselves within their own mind to like believe that they could be, that they can be good. I think that that's a problem just with anyone. Like with, it's what I'm trying to get out of my athletes constantly is for them to believe that success is personally like accessible for them. Like that it's not like some far off thing. It's right there. Like it might not be within arm's grasp, but it might be visible. You know, like you might just have to sort of metaphorically walk across the room to grab it, but there's nothing other than that sort of empty space in between that you can overcome and surpass. There's nothing keeping you from that.
So
Likewise,
I watched an episode of the Flagrant podcast recently.
mhm,
Now the comedians there doesn't really matter, but it was Andrew Schultz talking about being delusional enough to know
mhm,
that everything that he wants to do, he will do. Like he doesn't know how, but he knows he will do it. And I think that
mhm,
that's I really resonated with that because I'm the exact same. And again, neurotypical people might not understand this. Again, I've got ADHD and I'm dyslexic as shit. So for me, it's just spices. But like I always think that if I have this concept or this idea, my phrase for it is shy boys don't get sweets, right? So
I like that.
so for me, it's like I'm doing myself a disservice by not at least trying it. Like
Mhm,
America came from this. Like that opportunity came across my emails. I was like, probably not going to get it, but fuck it. Shy boys don't get sweets. Applied, got it. Like if I had, and then people always say like, yeah, but like, what if it doesn't work? I mean, if it does or doesn't, I would be in the exact same place. The worst thing that's going to happen is I get a no.
mhm,
Whether I applied for it or not, I would be in the exact same position. So you can at least try it,
mhm,
right? So for me, it's like it's being delusional enough that all my ideas will eventually come true. Now, that's not to say that I don't have to work for them. Obviously, that comes inheritedly. Like it doesn't just fall. Like I have to take steps to achieve it. And it's kind of something that you said. I can't remember if it was on the podcast or off, but it's like having this like step process to achieving something. And
mhm.
again, it's I sometimes when I'm speaking, people think I'm delusional as shit, but it's like I know I'll get there. I'm fine. I'll be
Yeah.
crazy for a couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah. The other side is forever. You're crazy until you do it. There are like, so this when we were putting the WPO on ESPN, there were people literally the day before saying it wasn't going to happen. They were at the venue saying it wasn't going to happen. The equipment trucks were literally outside. Like I was having to walk around to let the production truck through security. And somebody said something about how like it was going to fail. And I was like, they're renting this moment. This moment right here, they're renting being right. In this moment right now, they are free to
All in.
own this opinion which they think hurts me in some way. But I was like, but come 12 o'clock tomorrow, the little light's going to go red and the stream is going to go up and they're wrong forever. So it's like that guy just rented 12 hours. I can open up my Instagram and look at messages, you know, days before the release of Westside versus the World, days before saying it's not going to happen. this will never happen. This will never come out, you know, days before it hits Netflix. No one will ever see this. I'm like, the other side is forever. When I win, that win goes on that win will go on the record board forever. You get to call me crazy, delusional, liar. What you get to say anything you want to say about me right now. You know, like in the same, it's literally anything that you try. It's the same basic process, because there's something about like trying to do something that it threatens people. Because like I look at everything as, you know, there's not really anything that I want to do that I want to do uniquely just of my own. Nothing in this world that, like, everything that I want to do, I had to be exposed to first. I had to see, like, I didn't know that I wanted it until, you know, it comes down to like how loosely you define what is new or novel. But to me, it's like nothing is truly novel. Everything's kind of been done before, and your ideas, like you might have a idea on a slightly new iteration of it, but like nothing's really that new. So it's, you know, I wanted to make better technology because I had seen the technology before. I wanted to tell Louis' story because I knew Louis' story. I wanted to, you know, move to LA and make movies because I had watched the Royal Tenenbaums. I like everything I wanted. The commonality is there's nothing where it was like, I want to orbit the Earth as a satellite. Like I want to be a rock that orbits the Earth. No, weirdly, I think that this applies to basically everyone. We only want to do things that we've seen other people do, which means that all of your hopes, all of your dreams, they've already been accomplished by flesh and blood. So why you're not special, but neither, you're not special, but neither were they, which means the thing that they accomplished isn't special either. So your dreams are not special. You are not special. The person who you like stole those dreams off of, who you saw do it to some degree before you. You might go like, oh, I want to be better than Michael Jordan. Yeah, but you're still saying than Michael Jordan. You had to see a model of it from which to launch your dream off of. Like, so someone else has already laid the foundation for all of your aspirations. They weren't special. You aren't special. If they aren't special, then what they did isn't special. Why are you anxious? Why are you apprehensive about doing something that is inherently not special? When you start to like look at things that way, it's like nothing is that terrifying. Yeah, not like things just are. Weights aren't heavy or light; they just are. You know, if someone else had totaled 3,300, then Hoff would total 3,400. Like one of, you know, like if someone else had run 948, then Bolt pushes through the end of the race on his 958. And you know, like
that's still wild to me.
Yeah, but it's are we going to look back in 50 years and go like, wow, remember when we thought that was fast? You know, like when a 16-year-old runs down the world's best competition in the 800 and blows by everyone and almost catches blows through his age class record, or the high school age record, by 4 seconds almost. Is he that? No one thought that he was like the LeBron James of the 800. He was just sort of like, oh wow, look, a pretty impressive 16-year-old. And then you put him in a race with world-class athletes, and what happens? He tries to hang. And no one is there to tell him while he's racing. No one is in his ear saying, "Hey kid, you're dumb. Stop trying to do. These are world-class guys. Stop trying so damn hard." And he shocks everyone by running everyone down. And you go, "What if we just hadn't been telling those world-class guys that they were fast? What if we'd been in their ear all day telling them, you know, hey, there's a 16-year-old who's going to come embarrass you?" How many of them would have run that much faster? Just raise the expectations. Do we actually expect fast? Do we actually expect strong? Or are we still all just hamstrung by collective low expectations because no one has sort of laid that groundwork first? maybe we should all just like make up some fake records just to tell the kids. Just like give it like a decade. Let's just start telling kids that Usain Bolt ran 9.38, right? And you know that like just add 5 to 10% on top of all the world records, and let's just see if we tell all the kids for like 4 years. I bet you kids break all of the unbreakable records. Like kids, I bet you like sub 20. Tell all your kids that if it's not 40 inches high, it's not a very good jump. Tell all your kids if they can't if they're not squatting 6 plates, they're a child. All of a sudden you'll see the kids, they might not get where you say, but they'll blow past what you thought your expectations for them were.
To kind of piggyback off what you're saying, I thoroughly think that people care far too much about other people's businesses than they should. And if they spent that same amount of time focusing on themselves, they could also probably fucking do it. And that to me is just one thing that, again, I really don't care about much if it's not in the growth aspect of, again, we kind of mentioned it to you, but like if it's not the growth of the industry, I'm not going to interact with some negative shit within it. I'm not going to repost it. I'm not going to comment on it. I'm not going to talk about it. Like that is my time and my effort wasted. I would rather go on a coach's page that's doing some really dope shit and be like, hey, unreal, break it down for me. Let's talk about it. Like I think that mind shift that you're saying is crucial to the growth of everyone. Appreciate you so much for coming on. I know you're a little bit limited for time, so I don't want to make you run over because I know we could go on for ages. We will have to do something else though because I want some of these Louis stories.
Yeah, no problem.
No, I appreciate you so much for coming on and spending some time with us. Again, I will link OVR and your page down below. If there's anything else that you want to plug, just let me know, and I'll pull up just now.
That's pretty much it. OVR. We've got. I have a podcast, Burn the Ladders. You can find that on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. It's just me talking training. Some of the episodes are just me kind of deep diving into like one specific thing. It's far less nebulous than I've been today. And then OVRperformance.com. We've got affordable, and while they're affordable, they pack a punch. They've got everything that you want in them, very high build qualities. Everything that we've got out has been stress tested by me personally in my very chaotic training environment. We put it in the hands of 6th grade boys. If a 6th grade boy can operate it and not break it, then it's a solid product. It'll outlive us all. 60-day money-back guarantees, affordable prices. You shouldn't have to worry about having a divorce lawyer on call just because you wanted to buy some tech for your gym. Schools, private facilities. If you need a PO, holler at us. We can hook you up. Gamify your training.
Appreciate you. Peace.
No problem. See ya.